Afternoon and welcome to TechNation's Roundtable on Cybersecurity. Today we are joined by Derek Hills, Senior Product Manager at PartsSource, Skip Sorrels, Field CTO-CISO at Claroty, and Rick Joslin, IRCC, Senior Solutions Architect at FSI. And TechNation Editor John Wallace will be our moderator today. Okay, today's webinar, as usual, is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Now, just a quick reminder to please join us for our HTM Mixer Northwest, which is being held at the Hyatt Regency Bellevue Hotel in Seattle, Washington, and that's July the 31st and August the 1st. Now, our mixers are a slightly modified, shorter duration and less crowded event, but still provide valuable continuing education, networking, and vendor engagement opportunities. So for more information and registration details, please visit htmmixer.com. Also, please save the date for our full MD Expo. We're heading to the Rose and Shingle Creek Hotel in Orlando, Florida from October the 13th to the 15th. So please join us for 3 days of education, networking, and the latest advances in medical technology products and services. Again, for more information and registration details, please visit mdexposhow.com. Now, as you can see, GoToWebinar has a new look, so you will need to click on the question mark icon located at the top right-hand corner of your screen to answer today's trivia question. So let's kick off today's roundtable by giving away a multi-tool. So using the questions mark icon, let me know the answer to the following trivia question. June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. So what color is usually associated with the Alzheimer's Association? I'll reveal the answer and our winner at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions for our panelists, please submit your questions anytime using the question mark icon on your webinar screen. So John, I'll hand over to you to start today's presentation discussion.
Thank you, Linda. I'm excited to be joined today by this expert panel. Let's go around the room real quick and find out a little bit more about each of them, starting with Skip from Claroty.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me. Skip Sorrels, previously a customer of Claroty for like 6.5 years. I've been practicing cyber for 25, long before it was called cyber. Extended experience in healthcare. My degrees in nursing, was a critical care trauma nurse for several years, and then ultimately gravitated to the tech world and into cybersecurity. So happy to be here, happy to share my experiences and answer any questions.
Thank you, Skip. Now let's go over to PartsSource Senior Product Manager, Derek Hills. Derek, if you can please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone, for having me. Derek Hills, Senior Product Manager here at PartsSource. Been in the healthcare technology space for 8-9 years now, really focused on originally in cybersecurity and building some products in my previous life, now focused on kind of building a mission critical visibility, actionability, what HTM teams are using today to pull all their data sources into one view. So excited to be here, talk about my experience and how cyber starts to work into that world as well.
Great, Derek. Next up, we have Rick Joslin from FSI.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Rick Joslin with FSI. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect here. I've been in the maintenance management space for a little over 40 years. Been in the healthcare space for a little over 27. I've helped a couple of hundred organizations, both on the HTM and HFM side, implement CMMS's best practices, integrations. Back in 2019 or so, I really got into cybersecurity from the perspective of our customers starting to implement protocols and checks and balances using CMMSs. So it's kind of near and dear to my heart, so to speak, and I'm really honored to be part of here today.
Thank you, Rick. It's nice to have all of you here today, and I appreciate you giving us some time. Let's jump right into our panel discussion with the first question. For the first question, we will hear from each panelist beginning with Skip, followed by Derek, and then Rick. And that first question is, how are organizations working through the silos between HTM and IT teams? And what governance structures seem to be gaining traction for bringing these groups together to improve their security posture? And again, we'll start with you, Skip.
Thank you. So the interesting thing, just in the last 2 to 3 weeks of customer visits and engagements, I'm finding that organizations are placing the HTM teams under the CIO's organization. So we're seeing an organizational shift occur with reporting structure. And I think where those organizations have done that, the feedback that I hear from my questions to them, is it a good thing? Has it been a bad thing? And generally, it's a very positive response, and the response is along the lines of communication. More open dialogue is occurring. They're beginning to understand the lingo of the different departments, and they're arriving at a unified glossary of terms, if you will, a way to communicate more effectively with one another. And I think that's creating synergy and creating a forward motion for the future success of those organizations. So fundamentally, that organizational shift, in the absence of the shift of the org, it really boils down to communication and getting on the same page, speaking the same language, more importantly, understanding the expected goals and expectations of a cyber-focused environment. And that's going to be different to each person in their role and their understanding of it, and more importantly, their understanding of how they participate in those activities, such as patching and hygiene or hardening.
All right, thank you, Skip. And then next we'll go over to Derek for the same question.
I would echo a lot of what Skip just said. Biggest thing being communication. What we see today, or what we have seen in the past, is two siloed organizations that have two different goals and two different alignment postures to what's needed, and they treat each other as a checkbox. IT needs HTM to fit into that checkbox. HTM feels like they need to just complete the checkbox to move things along. Where we're seeing governance get better are those groups that are pulled together, like Skip said, under one CIO or one CISO, or that joint vision. We're seeing these lightweight frameworks kind of blend together to create a faster response to these things. Certainly language and speaking the same language is something that's needed, but teams with the same goal, understanding, hey, these are the assets I want covered, this is how they're covered, this is how we intend to cover them. If you can speak the language that IT needs to give an approval, for an example, those are the groups that are getting those stronger postures and moving things quicker through the organization.
Thank you, Derek. And then Rick, if you can answer the question as well.
The problem with coming up number 3 is they've already answered all the questions, right? It's similar to what they said. Back in 2018, 2019, we started moving from the biomed department to the CE department to now the HTM department. The industry is making a very conscious effort to bring these two critical, what used to be independent and often adversarial kind of departments together, knowing that together they are first line defense in cybersecurity in a large portion of what the organization does. Nowadays, HTM can't use equipment if it's not part of the IT system, and there's communications that happen back and forth. So, I'm starting to see a deeper integration in cross-functional councils about everything from network architecture to requirements on hardware purchasing and things like that way up front. I'm seeing the lingo definitely, becoming more common, what they call a process or a procedure or a protocol, as well as even down to infrastructure, hardware, and things like that. Today's HTM teams are much more technical in that area than they used to be. And they're thinking ahead onto equipment and equipment purchases, sometimes 3 and 5 years down the line. So they're able to contribute to growth and alterations and updates to infrastructure that could support that upcoming devices. So definitely the movement in combining the HTM and the IT into a CIO kind of an organization and bringing those two sides together is definitely probably the biggest change I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years.
All right, thank you very much. And then our next question, we'll start with Derek. And the question is, how are biomed and security leaders framing their cybersecurity challenges and progress in terms that resonate with non-technical leadership? And what level of engagement are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that is not the easiest thing to do. If I piggyback on the first question, some of the answers, obviously communication and speaking the same language is really the key, right? Your leadership might not know exactly what a CVE is or what the score matters or what that kind of impact is, but they do know that when there's a cyber event or some type of event, that it can equal in a deferred patient, rescheduled patients, or lost revenue if it's not getting rescheduled and that patient's just walking out the door and going somewhere else. So it's really taking the language that matters and flipping it into operational risk. What is actually at risk when some of these happen? How do we speak to leadership with what matters, right? So showing going from a cyber event into an actual actionable, what is on the table for this event and how it's impacting the hospital is what's moving the needle at those levels. So seeing the engagement move from the HTM industry, kind of talking about assets. We all know what an MRI is. We all know what a CT is. So anchoring on an asset and the impact of that asset going down is truly what we're seeing matters at that level of conversation.
Thank you, Derek. And then next up, we have Rick.
Echoing what Derek just mentioned, yes, communication in the style of communication, I think, has been growing and morphing over the last few years, moving a little bit more from a technical to an applicable language when they're describing, as Derek mentioned, we have an MRI, it is connected to the network. If it gets an issue through the cybersecurity side of things, here's the impact, and here's why we need to be able to protect it and have systems in place, that ensure the uptime of this equipment, and phrasing it in a way that the C-suite can understand it. Not that they're not technical and capable, so to speak, but definitely in the communication side of things. I've also started to seeing more junior level, so to speak, involvement in cybersecurity and cybersecurity communications. Making sure that the team's voice, so to speak, is heard in the impact and the risk and things like this, and that gets communicated up. That leadership is more prone to listening now to a broader input when it comes to cybersecurity decisions. I think that's been a big change in the last 3 or 4 years as well that I've seen.
Thank you, Rick. And then Skip, if you could share your thoughts on the question.
Sure, I'll use the analogy of putting a bow on it. Where I'm seeing everything that these two gentlemen have just very, very well articulated. When you start talking about the impact and you tie it to operational resilience, that's when you get the attention of the COO. When you start talking about uptime, mean time to resolve, and tie it to resilience of an organization, and then tie it to a business impact analysis, now you're really breaking down what I would often refer to as attack chain modeling. It's not a term I would use at that level, but that's the way I'm thinking about it. Those devices represent ecosystems. And if you break any one link in that ecosystem, you lose uptime. You have patient safety issues. And the COO doesn't talk cyber, but they do talk disaster recovery and preparedness. And they tie that to hard dollars. And they tie that to patient safety and reputation. And so having conversations around uptime, operational resilience, business impact analysis, and financial outcomes really starts to shape and form the strategy of the organization in a way that I've not seen before, quite frankly.
Thank you, Skip. The next question we have for the panel is, why is it so important to connect cybersecurity to the same CMMS and service workflows that hospitals already use for maintenance and operations? And we'll start with you, Rick.
Well, I think it's become a fundamental and expected responsibility of of healthcare service departments to consider and implement cybersecurity assessments. You know, they have to do the risk assessments, has to be part of that whole process, and it has to be ingrained into the daily activity with the equipment they're using. So now most inventory records or inventory artifacts have some kind of cybersecurity values as standard input. Risk assessments are incorporating cybersecurity as well. You know, but it's only one part of the landscape here. The other part is, what do you do when a breach happens or an event happens? And relying on the manual human process means you're losing time, right? Um, you know, if there's an event happens, that having an integration to a CMMS allows that activity to be almost instantly notified out. So you get this ability to track the identified issues. Records creation is automated without delay. You know, downstream, you're now logging that activity, the remediation activities that are done. You're connecting all that to affected devices. You know, the organization now gets greater reporting and compliance analytics out of that. I think the visibility at all levels becomes much more transparent when you have it connected to a CMMS. But you're really breaching, I think, the two sides to that, the service and maintenance side and the IT and oversight side together when you start bringing cybersecurity into the CMMS.
Thank you, Rick. Next, Skip, we'll go to you.
I would definitely echo what Rick said, and I would take a little bit different approach just to kind of put another kind of layer of flavor on it, and that's around the efficiency part that he mentioned. Anytime I've seen an organization, including the ones that I've come from, incorporate into a normal activity, so I'll use preventative maintenance on medical devices as the example, rather than having a conversation around you've got to do extra, have a conversation around how do we incorporate patching into normal preventative maintenance, because PVs are scheduled ahead of time, meaning they have change control windows and downtimes already allocated. And so if you can stack the effort of the individual one time on a device that they're already going out to touch, you've increased the efficiency, you've managed your downtime related to change, and you've improved that, you know, that acceleration of effort into that one workflow. And there's many others that you can look at, but bottom line is it relates to less time, less effort, less expense, and better outcomes, better hygiene for the organization as those things are folded together.
Thank you, Skip. And then Derek, your thoughts?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The only thing I would add is we've never asked so much of clinical engineering. So using what exists today and what they know today, and not having a second, third, fourth system to go in and log documentation is the key. You're going to get efficiencies just from using what you have and what exists today. What exists today usually has a workflow or a documented workflow that we know how to follow. And what we've been seeing in the industry, especially with cybersecurity, is it's just another data source on the asset. Like Skip said, you know, uptime is key. Keeping this equipment up and running is key. To the highest levels of the hospital, it's key. To the patients we serve, it's key. So the ability to just use cybersecurity as another data source, if you had an example of a nurse calling and saying an MRI is down, and treating that the same thing as one of these PVs that come in that we can schedule as a patch, those can be the same types of alerts that come into the same system that get prioritized based off the impact. If you can knock out two of them with one tech going out and serving one piece of equipment, now you're gaining that time back. Now you're gaining that efficiency. You're keeping that revenue on track, and you're able to just see it all in one place. The last piece of the puzzle, it just gives you better visibility. It's all in one place. Not only can you see the history of the asset, all the work orders, the preventative maintenance, the corrective maintenance that have applied to it, now you have another piece to the puzzle in the history of that asset. You know how many patches were put on it. You know what compensating controls or different types of remediations were put on it. It's just another piece of history on the asset that you get to see anytime anything else comes up. So it can help serve capital planning down the line, but it definitely gets the efficiency of just using a thing that exists for a team that we're just asking more and more from different things and different tools.
Thank you, Derek. The next question is, why does medical device cybersecurity become more actionable when it is tied to device health, connectivity, support status, and operational context? And Skip, we'll kick this one off with you, please.
So I think the answer to that to this question is quite similar to the one that we just answered. I think that I would frame it from shifting a lens of just cybersecurity to business intelligence. When I look at healthcare organizations grapple with lifecycle management of their assets, and I say that knowing that there's an end of life, there's an end of support, and there's an end of useful life. Well, the convergence of cyber risk and end of useful life, meaning beyond a device's patchable lifespan, there is a continued use, and there are financial impacts to that device functioning longer than it was intended to be patched. However, your risk increases over time as the life cycle begins to decline. So the business intelligence of having that data correlation and context becomes a conversation around capital planning. It becomes a conversation around risk registry, risk acceptance. It becomes a conversation around, how do we look at our fleet? Do we need to consider standardization on a one or two vendor approach, depending on the use case, whether it be radiology or cardiac? Those are the conversations that are being had, and interestingly enough, they begin from typically the precursor of cybersecurity risk and the questions that are asked of the organization around capital planning. This device is long in the tooth. When are you planning to replace it, so that we can understand how we protect it in its journey in final life?
Thank you, Skip. And then next up for this question, it's Derek, if you can share your thoughts.
Yeah, I totally agree with Skip. It's just another piece to the puzzle. If you can tie it to a piece of equipment, it's much more actionable when you have the context and the history of that equipment. Very similar to the last question. The thing I would add is it allows you to be more actionable. It allows you to triage faster. It's another tool in the tool belt to be able to see what's going on with a piece of equipment and just have much more context. Because if you're just getting an alert and you're just understanding what the asset is, but you don't have context of where the asset is, or you don't have context of what's been done with the asset, then it really doesn't matter. Because if it's an equipment in a back room, and like Skip said, it's end of life and its risk is super high to keep going after it, then we're probably not going to prioritize that to send our CE across the hospital to the back room to find a device that's not even hooked up, or it hasn't been in operation in a few months. So again, just having the context and the visibility into that asset's history is what's going to make the cybersecurity more intelligent in our systems that exist today. It's going to create and become more actionable by just being beside the other data that's already there on the equipment. So I think Skip hit it well, and it really puts us in a place to triage and prioritize this actionable data that comes in from these tools.
Rick, what can you add?
Not much. One of the things I would expand on is having cybersecurity as part of your inventory management system, CMMS, does allow you to do lots of decisions based off of actual actionable data. I'll continue to use that phrase. So, for example, knowing how many devices are connected and how many are disconnected, right? You have an event or something that gets pushed out, an update that has to happen. Having that data inside of your inventory management system, what devices need to be affected, which ones are in use now and maybe connected, which ones aren't connected. If you happen to have a breach, you're being able to very quickly identify, again, what assets are connected in that particular part of the network, that node or anything like that, allows your team to formulate a response plan better. Definitely within life cycle and capital planning activities, being able to continuously track events to device types, manufacturers, models, and where they're at, as Skip had mentioned, in their life cycle. Are they towards the end of the support? Are they beyond the useful life or close to it? I think having that data at the fingertips of the decision makers alleviates a lot of the questioning and the guessing when those decisions have to be made. It just provides that empirical data at the point in time of need for our teams.
Thank you, Rick. This next question is a long one, so hang in there with me. With HTM teams getting leaner and resource constraints tightening, how are you managing the growing cybersecurity workload? And what would a truly integrated automated solution need to look like to make a meaningful difference for a department? And we'll go over to you first, Derek.
Yeah, off the top, the answer isn't and can't be just hire more people. It's expanding faster than that. It's more complex, and not only can we not hire all the people we probably need, we can't train them and give them the knowledge and understanding of what actually exists in the system today. We've touched on it kind of a few questions in a row, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but that truly integrated, automated solution is one where you're just talking to what exists. So if it's whatever tools you have are integrated and talking to allow you to triage and prioritize in a better fashion. So an end-to-end solution that works for HTM today is one where things are talking to each other and prioritized in a way that you understand what truly is a fire drill and what isn't. When an alert comes in, or a vulnerability, or it could even be an actual attack, you understand what things are talking to, what has been done on the equipment that matters, what's mission critical, what we know we need to keep up ASAP, or what's in the back rooms, like I touched on in the last question. But a truly end-to-end solution that's going to help HTM today is just integrated, automated, and make sure that the context lives for everybody. It's not just shared in certain people's heads, because where we're at with the growing pace of what we're asking clinical engineering to do, we owe it to build a solution that helps kind of have these easier conversations, takes away the admin work, and just lets them understand where the prioritization is, what they have to do, and where they have to go to do it.
Thank you, Derek. That was a good answer. And then Rick, we'll go over to you.
I can't add a whole lot. I think definitely the end-to-end integration is important. Having devices connected to what I'm going to term the IT source of truth kind of systems, I think it's critical. Most CMMSs can't sniff networks, can't identify what's connected, what those addresses are. They're a repository. So being connected to a system that's capable of doing that, and then pushing that information down to the HTM CMMS, without them having to do that manually. I mean, I've worked with customers where that was done via a file transfer manual process. It just is a nightmare for that. As you mentioned, the more that our organizations, our customers are struggling with hiring, with staffing, we need systems that are smarter, not harder, right? An integrated system would be able to receive, let's say, a patch notice, identify the affected assets in the system, generate the work tickets, correlate them with those assets, and produce that out to the team that's going to have to schedule that and perform those. Means that a person's not doing that. They're still out there maintaining the inventory, but they're being notified that that's done out there. Also ensuring that those systems, when they're integrated, you got to be able to handle false positives and things like that to build the trust between those systems. If the teams don't trust that these systems talking are talking correctly, so to speak, that they're not getting a lot of activity that ends up not being necessary, then they're not going to rely on it, and they're going to go back to more, I would say, more time-consuming processes. And even down to, an integrated system would be able to update things like, is a device still connected, right? If it's not, then change the connectivity flag on the device so that our HTM teams understand that if something comes down the pipe, which one, as we talked about earlier, which ones do I need to address right now because they are connected, and which ones can I come back to later because they're not connected. So I think truly integrated systems are going to manage that back and forth. Allowing an HTM technician to take a piece of equipment, disconnect it, have that flag the IT system, and update that without a manual process is definitely going to reduce the manual workload for our teams.
All right. Skip, you're up next. I'll read the question again. With HTM teams getting leaner and resource constraints tightening, how are you managing the growing cybersecurity workload? And what would a truly integrated, automated solution need to look like to make a meaningful difference for a biomed HTM department?
I would say that the successful organizations that have done this rolled up their sleeves and realized that they had to do some heavy lifting up front. And what I mean by that is they needed to map each and every workflow, incorporate it with a RACI so that everyone understands their role throughout that workflow, the effort and the resource overhead required to do it. And in doing that mapping of the workflow end to end, you then begin to look at ways to become more efficient. You incorporate the things that Rick and Derek have said about prioritization. Is it on the wire? Is it off the wire? Is it a high risk item? Is it an end of life item? And those things begin to get folded into that. And what you end up with is a derivative of a workflow workload and measurement system where you can actually track and predict your resource requirements. I've seen some organizations do this and actually staff up when they knew the workload was going to increase and staff down, so they flex more. Now, if I take it to the blue sky, which is where I start to think forward-looking future, I'm beginning to research and look at ways to take well-oiled workflows and leverage AI to create even more shift-left activities so that the human in the loop is at the final point where they have to be, for example, hands-on keyboard. So what I envision is what I've seen happen in the IT space. We leverage tools like SCCM to deliver payloads and patches. We don't do that in healthcare, and there's a real reason why we don't, and it's called patient safety and interruption. However, I do believe that with technology and the introduction of AI and even moving to agentic capabilities, we can orchestrate a lot of the effort to the point where we could envision a patch is already deployed to a device that needs a patch. However, it sits there and wait until the HTM or CE engineer shows up, hands on keyboard, validates there's no patient in play, and executes the payload to update the patch. So we're getting as close to automation in that regard, and that's truly what I envision. And I also think that there's going to be devices that we can determine that can use that type of technology without human intervention. It would be mostly outside of the biomed or the FDA regulated devices, obviously, but having a mechanism that is akin to IT patch management, as close to automation as we can get, is going to be the way that we have to go, because there are resource constraints and staffing shortages in organizations today.
Thank you, Skip. That was a very well thought out answer. The next question we have is, when a cybersecurity alert fires on a connected medical device, how quickly can your team trace it back to an asset record, generate a corrective work order, and document the response for compliance? And where does that process break down today? And we'll go to Rick first.
Well, I think that's going to depend on the systems and the effort put into integrations. Right now, with real-time integrations, depending on where that original alert comes from, it could be anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds, right? Depending on how fast that integration is feeding into a CMMS. That initial load should include and will include, the equipment, the issue, any kind of potential remediating action. That should all be part of the work order, so to speak, that gets created. That can be coupled with automated distribution and notification. So ticket gets created as soon as, per se, it gets saved, a message is going to a team, letting them know that that's out there. Partner that in with mobile capabilities. So now I don't have to be at a desktop. I can get a notice on my phone. I can see what's going on. I can be on my way within 60 to 90 seconds to where that device is located, and being able to start remediating the activity there. Where does it break down today? A lot of my experience, HTM is still as technological as they are. They still like more of a desktop kind of look and feel in their applications. They all have smartphones, but they don't always use them, right? So there's always a breakdown in that process somewhere. I would say notifications are handling pretty quickly now, but most of them are coming out of an IT-based system, not a CMMS, inventory management system. So that's where I think the breakdown is. But in an integrated ecosystem, it could be a matter of seconds. How fast can one system talk to the other, produce a record, and send a notice? That's the only limitation to how quickly someone could be responding to it.
Thank you, Rick. And then Skip, we'll go to you with the same question.
So I'm going to take a different approach in answering this, and I completely agree with everything that Rick said. I think the breakdown is fundamental to communication and working manually through the workflows and establishing metrics to track outcomes. So mean time to resolve, or MTTRs, are extremely important as a KPI, because you can leverage the MTTRs that are not favorable and then root cause the workflow to better understand how to improve it. And so organizations that are maturing are doing that type of work. And I would even take it as far as to say it's an imperative now that you move to a tabletop exercise, so you actually exercise the muscle memory of a workflow, of a playbook during an alert that becomes an incident. So again, you're testing the strength of the team and the workflow and the ability to remediate, and you're timing it. And so you use a use case of a real example of something that happens, you pull your playbooks out, and everyone sits around the table and works through that to completion, to learn where they're weak, to understand where they're strong, and more importantly, how can they improve.
Thank you, Skip. And then Derek, if you could share your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll focus on kind of what we see in the industry today on the breakdown side. A lot of it starts with communication between people and systems. A lot of the health systems we see out there, not only is the internal personal communication not great, but their systems don't talk to each other either. So where a cybersecurity alert generates from never actually makes it to a CMMS until the person monitoring that system tells the person monitoring the CMMS, which then has to talk to the person who's been at the hospital for 15 or 20 years to get the tribal knowledge and get the awareness of, hey, yeah, that's actually the MRI that matters. That's the one that's being used. So all of that together is what we see in breaks in kind of the main breakdown today is you need multiple eyes on glass in multiple different places, which is really hard with what we ask clinical engineering to do today. So it's tightening that together is kind of what Skip and what Rick said. If we can start to communicate better and we can start to tie our systems together to better, then we have a better chance at putting that playbook into action. Then we know when an alert comes in, what's the workflow to even open and document and understand. You're only as good as the knowledge you have or the visibility to the knowledge you have. And I would say the biggest issue, the biggest challenge HTM faces today is the multitude of tools and data sources that are coming at them that just aren't talking together. They're begging for a single place to go to say, okay, I have asset 1, 2, 3. What's the history? What are the patches that are available? What did we patch? What work orders exist? When was the last PM done? That's not an easy story to answer today. You can't answer that in 30 seconds today, like Rick was saying. It's somewhere where you have to log in multiple places to find those answers and kind of pull it together from all these different sources. So the challenge HTM is facing today is closing those communication gaps between individuals, between systems, between workflows, between documentation, you name it. It's tying all that together to have one place to be able to action an alert that comes from a tool that our customers or our what we're seeing in the industry pays for, is what's going to get them that resilience and that efficiency and that uptime that not only are our patients asking for, but the C-suite and who's working in the top levels of the hospital as well.
Thank you, Derek. We've had some questions come in. I'm going to merge two questions here that came in because I think they go together. We had people ask, what are the challenges that HTM community in general is facing with the AI and implications to cybersecurity? And then also, what are some of the benefits of AI and how it can help with cybersecurity was other part of the question. So like, what are the challenges, and then what can be some benefits that you can see from AI? And we will go to Skip first.
I think I kind of highlighted my vision for automation and leveraging AI. So the positive side of it, I think I said it before, I'll say it again. There always has to be a human in the loop in anything that we do AI, because it's the human that knows right from wrong in workflows and processes and device types, patient safety, all those things. I think the question I get asked most about AI is, what should I worry about in an organization? And I think this applies to HTM because it's really a general answer. AI is great power, and with it comes great responsibility. And so fundamentally, organizations are trying to determine how to govern the use of AI in an organization. And what I mean by that is there's intellectual property, there's patient, records, there's personal information, PHI. Those things are the things that organizations worry about getting released into the wild. I will tell you, though, as a human being that worked in the DoD space, my information's been out there for 20 some years. So quite frankly, I don't worry about it too more. I worry more about my defense. And so I kind of apply the same strategy to governance of AI. If we don't want it out, then what fences are we building to keep it in? I raised on a farm. I'm a cattle kid. Same analogy, right? You've got to keep your fences up. You've got to set your expectations with your people and their behavior. So there's training that's necessary. But all of those things can be leveraged and harnessed in a way to accelerate the capability of clinicians, their time and efficiency. The same thing applies for HTMs. I would love to take AI and leverage it against the HTM CMMS ticketing system to understand where things are inefficient and show where things could be more efficient, and do that through harnessing AI to do the analysis, to do the math, if you will, that normally probably takes organizations sometimes hours, days, and months to come away with. I would love to apply AI to lifecycle. Give me the lifecycle management plan of XYZ device based on its birth date and its end of life, end of support. Give me the financials around that planning. Give me the financials of the lifespan from its end of life, end of support to useful life, so that useful life, and give me a derivative that says at this point in time the risk is so great that device needs to be retired because we squeezed as much financial efficiency out of it as we can. So those are just examples of how I think about leveraging AI and the concerns that I have with it.
All right, thank you. And next we'll go over to you, Derek.
Yeah, echo everything Skip says. I would say the biggest challenge with AI today that we see that's out there in the industry is whatever, if we give the organization access to AI, everyone has access to AI. So Skip nailed it, the governance piece of that as well. But as much as it's internal, AI is also in the hands of the external user as well. So the hackers that have been doing this for 20 years are just getting more powerful, more efficient. Everything we're trying to do on the defense side, the workflow side, the automation side, they're doing on the attack side as well. So that's obviously a large challenge. Is whatever we have capabilities to, that's also out there on the negative side of what people are trying to attack in the healthcare industry as well. From like a positive and looking forward aspect, Skip nailed it as well. It's in his previous answer, the ability to take AI and reduce false positives and take away, hey, you got to look at every single alert yourself and figure out if it matters. The more time we put into our clinical engineers' hands to turn a wrench, to fix an asset, to get uptime, to get an equipment from down to up is the key. So if we can start to automate a lot of the things Skip talked about and Rick's talked about in our previous conversations as well, if we can automate workflows, if we can automate prediction, if we can take a look at if we're documenting everything in one place, which I apologize, I sound like a broken record, but if everything's in one place, that's a place that an agent can read. That's something we can read the documentation, the work notes, the work orders, the cyber alerts. So if we're automated, our AI is automated. If the information is better in, the information is going to come better out. So it's really what we put into the effort in the upfront. We've seen with our customers as well, they're begging us to do those things that Skip said. They're begging us to figure out how to take their data, give them tools to make their data better, so they can just query that data any way they want to get insights, actions, plans, from capital down to how to be more efficient, walking across the hospital. Whatever they want, they need to put in on the front end as well. So the ability to make AI better is really putting the onus on that better documentation, setting our systems up to talk to each other, so that lift is not so great, but the payout at the end will be much greater as well.
Thank you, Derek. And then Rick, over to you.
I wish I could add to what they've said. Definitely AI is, in my role and with my company, we're hearing the same thing. Our customers want AI to help them in the decision making and the actionable item kind of process. Definitely the fences have to be there. AI has the ability to affect a lot of workflows and a lot of activities, but in the realm of cybersecurity, AI could be leveraged in some of the predictive analytics and the predictive activity, as well as being able to provide to that technician at the keyboard. And I do agree with Skip and Derek that in healthcare, I'm kind of wary about having AI take complete control, start to finish of anything, right? But being able to provide to that person at the end that has to say yes, every conceivable analytic to make that decision accurate. But even in the documentation, you can train AI to be able to take talk to text kind of input, convert that into coding on a record, and make that data a lot more actionable and I would say more consistent at the front end, allowing decisions to be continued to be made downstream. So yeah, I definitely agree with Derek on you got to have good data. The AI's got to be able to use that data to train and learn, but you also have to keep it within its wheelhouse so it doesn't go outside of it and start maybe leading you down the wrong path, so to speak.
All right, thank you, Rick. Another question we had come in, and we'll go to you, Derek, first on this one. The question is, our hospital does traditional risk assessment, but we cannot do additional risk assessment based on manufacturer disclosure statement for medical device security and software bill of materials. Please tell me what other hospitals do additional risk assessment at cybersecurity point of view. So I guess they're asking, like, what are some things they can do to check for cybersecurity assessment in addition to what they're already doing?
Yeah, it's a tough question without obviously knowing the hospital, but the ability to just understand your devices and pull the documentation together is 90% of the battle, right? There's lots of assessments out there that we can do and run, but without the context of the hospital and what's needed and the goals of the hospital, it's really key to make sure that, one, we have insight into the assets. We know what assets we want to cover. We know what risk goals we have. We know what risk we're trying to reduce or which capital plans and options we have moving forward. Getting that together, I think, is the biggest thing we can do outside of, working with the OEM if that's not an option. I think just understanding medical devices in the context of the hospital and the data sources that are available to it puts you in a really good place to just understand what devices are mission critical, what can't go down, what do we do if one of these go down moving forward. So I would start there and kind of work my way into the context of the hospital for sure.
Thank you, Derek. And then over to you, Rick.
I agree with Derek. I think there is the ability to incorporate into risk assessments. I'm going to speak from a CMMS perspective because that's kind of my forte. Incorporating into your standard risk assessments in your inventory system, your cybersecurity components, right? But you got to know the equipment first. You got to know what the manufacturer is providing to you, SBOMs and things like that. You have to understand the risk structure that the organization has and what their willingness to do within risk categories, but definitely make it part of that assessment. I mean, we have to risk assess all of our equipment anyways. It's got to be done. It's got to be documented. Talk with, and back to communication, talk with your other departments, your IT and your cybersecurity teams, figure out what it is that they need on top of what the manufacturers say, and then pull it all together and just apply it. I can't give you, as Derek mentioned, without knowing more specifics, I can't give you a lot of specific guidance on it, but generally speaking, yeah, you got to know your equipment, you got to know your organization and their risk adverseness, and then pull it together from there.
Thank you, Rick. And then Skip, do you have anything to add?
I think one of the approaches that gets organizations to where Rick and Derek just described is, I'll go back to my ITIL framework days. You tier assets based on criticality. And if you take that approach where a tier 0 means that device has to have complete uptime, it is mission critical, it's patient safety critical, and you begin to tag those devices based on the tiers. Now, this does require the organization to weigh in to what they believe a tier 0 device is. That then takes us to the business impact analysis. Now we're talking about disaster preparedness and understanding of those ecosystems of devices so that we can appropriately label them or tier them based on our knowledge of their function and importance to the environment. Once we understand that, we then get to what's our risk appetite. Is a tier 0 absolutely 4 nines, meaning an uptime of 4 nines? Or do we have a little bit of leverage? And when you can map that out, and this is not an easy task because we're not talking about IT BIAs, we're talking about enterprise-wide BIAs where we're also incorporating supply chain risk into this now. We've just expanded. So let's say an organization who receives supplies from one of the gas distributors. You've got to have helium for your MRIs and your CTs. They're inert gases that are required. And if that supply chain's broken because of a cyber event that happens in your organization, are you aware of the impact So I've gone really broad. The concept here, though, is organizationally, you have to understand the impact to the business from an enterprise view to begin to then tier your assets and your ecosystems to understand how you're going to respond in certain events based on their criticality.
All right, thank you very much. We have one more question that we'll go through, and we'll start with Rick on this one. Medical devices have traditionally been expected to remain in service for 7 to 10 years or longer. However, rapidly evolving cybersecurity requirements, operating system obsolescence, and emerging threats can effectively shorten the usable life of otherwise functional devices. Here's the question. How do healthcare organizations and manufacturers reconcile the growing gap between expected device life cycles and pace of cybersecurity change?
That's a good one. Mm. Well, I think it's going to have to start with communication being the big one. You got to be able to communicate up and downstream with how changes in cybersecurity needs, software updates, hardware obsolescence, new technology, how all of that's going to affect the equipment in the inventory, but also combined with, we've been talking about AI and things like this, incorporating assessments about how resistant to AI and AI type attacks or assets. Are there newer versions out there that are more resistant to that? Does that affect how you're going to look at the life cycle of the current type of equipment you have? Short of kind of repetitive analytics with what's out there and what's going on, that's what's going to be needed. You would hope that manufacturers would be more forthcoming, saying that, yeah, we know that model has got some issues that we can't remediate. They're not always that forthcoming with that information. They want you to use it as long as they can sometimes. But I think understanding the cybersecurity environment and your ecosystem and how updates affect usability is going to be key in realizing how that affects the life cycle of a piece of equipment.
All right, thank you, Rick. And then Skip, the same question over to you.
Anytime I get asked a question like, how do you predict the future? My response is with fundamentals. The beauty of cybersecurity is it's simplistic in its nature, and the underpinning the CIS 18 controls, for example. Most organizations don't mature beyond CIS 3, which is your vulnerability management. So fundamentals to me are, what are your security controls? What are your technical controls that you can leverage to buy you time? So the first thing that comes to mind with regard to the lifecycle of an asset is you better have the capability to do segmentation or micro-segmentation, because that's really the only technical control out there today. As times change, it allows you a buffer of time to make considerations, to make financial decisions about what you do with the life cycle of that asset. So asset inventory is number one, software asset inventory is number two, vulnerability management is number three, and then you get into some of the more advanced skill sets. But fundamentally speaking, when we talk about different attack methodologies, I always come back to, can you segment that device off and protect it from the outside or protect it from the invader attacker?
All right, thank you. And then quickly, we'll go over to you, Derek.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I truthfully think these groups are never going to keep pace with how fast cybersecurity is going. So I honestly feel, as organizations, health systems, hospitals, whatever you want to call these groups, we have to take ownership. We have to take ownership in the sense of exactly what Skip and Rick just said. Understanding what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do, and taking matters into our own hands where If we think a device is going to move from, let's just call it 10 years for a simple thing, a medical device lasts 10 years, and in the future we think that goes down to 5, that's a decision organizationally we have to be ready for. If we think a medical device is going to go from 5 years to end of life kind of thing, are we willing to keep that risk in our system? Are we willing to manage that past the 5 years, or do we have to have a capital planning conversation? I truly think we have to stay ahead of OEMs and these different cyber groups to just understand and make sure that we know what we want to be as a cybersecurity organization in our hospitals. We know what we want to manage and how long we want to manage things for, and just make sure exactly what Skip said, whatever remediation we can do and have the skills to do, we're doing that to not eliminate, but mediate as much of the risk as possible and take on as much of that risk as we're willing to take on as these devices age out into the capital planning conversation.
Thank you to each of you for helping us out today with this panel webinar. And then I'm going to go back over to Linda so she can remind everyone how to get their continuing education credits.
Perfect. Thanks, John, and thanks, gents, for your time. And what a great discussion. Thank you. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit our panelist company websites to find out more about the services they provide the industry. So please visit claroty.com, PartsSource.com, and fsiservices.com. Now, as promised, the answer to today's trivia question is purple. So congratulations to our winner, James Silver. Just a quick reminder, you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. Now, you must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. If you've missed any of our previous roundtable discussions, please visit webinarwednesday.live to view our whole archive. We'll be back again next month with another roundtable discussion on the subject of CMMS. So please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and, of course, complimentary registration. So thank you all once again for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.